So, my video is about the game design document I made for my game called Dark Maze. Um, yeah, so let's get into it. So, the basic game overview of my game is that Dark Maze is planning on being a single player 3D platform game, which is pretty much meaning that the player has a choice of two characters who I designed called Margot, the sorceress, so this would be a female character, and Max the sorcerer, which would be a male character. Um, the whole plan of the game is that these two young kids are training to be sorcerers, and they live in a magical forest. They're under the training of a man who's called the Grand Master, and one day he's planning on teaching them to do magic, but he has to go scavenging for some ingredients for potions and all sorts, but he doesn't return. So the two decide to go and look for him, only to discover that their beautiful home has been overrun by large, dark hedges, which trap them inside something that forms some sort of maze, which is quite obviously very not normal in this situation. Um, and all of a sudden, these dark spirits start to appear, and they're trying to capture the two as they've already captured their master. And this was given order by a character I designed called Helena the Dark Witch. Obviously, what's the plan of the game is that these two characters, obviously, they'll choose one, but they have to try and escape from these dark spirits by navigating their way through the maze. Along the way, they will receive help and guidance from other spirits who are called light spirits, and also magical berries, which have certain powers to them, which you'll discover later, obviously. Um, in my opinion, I think Dark Maze was influenced by other games like Pac Man and Mario, because it's that sort of you have to try and make your way to a certain point and you have to collect things along the way while also trying to escape from enemies. Um, but I also think I was influenced by a show that I watched a lot as a kid, Gravity Falls and Steven Universe, because this gives that kind of cartoony feel, I think. Also, that feeling of it's not normal, it's fictional, you know what I mean? It's things that wouldn't be in real life. Um, I plan the game being suitable for all ages. It's going to come with a PGI 3 rating, so obviously it will contain some violence of obviously spirits getting attacked, that kind of thing. But it'll be in a fantasy context. Um, so it may frighten some players, but obviously this will be a very young rating. Um, this is mainly just because the player will lose lives in the game by getting hit by enemies or obstacles, obviously, but there will be no actual display of violence in the game. So the story and narrative is that Margot and Max are sorcerers in training, studying under the Grand Master, as I've said, and he goes out looking for ingredients for spells, but he doesn't come back. So the two have to go outside and they discover that the forest has been taken over by a large maze by dark magic. And they have to try and obviously escape all these dark creatures trying to come after them along the way to get to the end where Helena, the Dark Witch, will meet them. Along the way, they will interact with light spirits, which I mentioned earlier. These were summoned when the forest started to become overrun, as obviously light spirits are guardians of this forest and they sensed something was wrong. The light spirits also have the ability to illuminate any dark spirits following them for about 10 seconds. So this gives them enough time to make some distance between the threat. So if you interact with a light spirit when you meet in the maze, they will obviously try and give you a more idea of what's behind you. Obviously, you're not aware of that most of the game, but this will give you a little bit of help. You have to try and outrun the enemy until you reach the end of the maze. Um, and obviously, after a couple of levels, that's when you'll reach the Dark Witch's lair. I plan on the game starting with a short animated intro where you kind of see Margot and Max side by side mixing potions as the master leaves the house to go, obviously, looking for ingredients. Um, a day is going to go by, I think, so they'll give them quite a bit of time. And this is when they start to get scared because obviously they are children, they're not adults, so they start to get a bit nervous. And I want the door to open as they're preparing to go search for him, so they'll be very concerned, but they'll also be getting ready. But they'll stop shocked when they realize that their home, their cabin, has been surrounded by large overgrown bushes. Um, Suddenly they'll realize what's going on when the dark spirits start to appear, and they'll start running. They also have to avoid trees and very large stones and boulders in the maze. Whilst running, they also have to interact with the light spirits who will help them on their way, and they have to just try and manage all this until they get to the end. So, settings and levels, I've planned this out quite a bit. So, as I've said, the game is set in an enchanted forest and it's going to be at the start set at night. So, the scenery is going to be mainly dark colours like blues and purples, other creepy colours that you kind of would suggest to see. So obviously this also means that the light spirits will be more noticeable in the maze due to the fact that they'll be like whites and pale yellows. Um, Part one of obviously the first level is I plan on calling it Retrieving the Dark Key. So there'll be multiple. So after the introduction of the characters where they have to start running through the bushes, passing gravestones with keyboard instructions on them, this is just so that the player is made aware of what they have to do, because obviously in most games when you enter them you don't know what you need to do, so you need some instruction there. So as they begin to get used to the controls, I plan on there being an animated bat who will follow us for a short amount of time, and he has some valuable information. So the bat is just going to tell you what's been going on so far. He has been watching over the forest and he needs help, and he tells you where you need to go and what you need to do. So along the way, the player also has to use the scenery to help their cause. In certain lanes, there will be cutoff points, and obviously in which the player has to try and scale items such as boulders, as I said. In the round, the player starts with 3 lives, and obviously they have to try and reach the end of the maze before time runs out, or their lives runs out. The player can lose lives by running into dead ends in the maze. I plan on there being 3 lanes in the maze, which means they have options of where they want to go. Yeah, and finally, when you reach the end of the maze, you have to try and scale a couple of grass platforms. And when you get to the top, you have to try and grab the dark key. And once you do, a flash of white light will appear, filling the screen. But when it evaporates, you'll be at another maze. So part 2 is called Retrieving the Dawn Key. So when the light disappears, obviously you're teleported to a completely different layout of maze, but there is more light in this level as it is no longer nighttime, but it's now at a dawn kind of sky. So it's kind of like oranges and yellows. So during this level, the dark spirits will become more of a threat as their speed will start to increase because they know that there isn't as much darkness anymore, which means they have less time to catch us. This also means that the level will be a bit more difficult. This shows a new threat, which is dark holes.